Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Espen Larsen and I will be the moderator today. Today's webinar is for shipping companies about their responsibilities under the EU Emissions Trading System. And we have invited authorized representatives of maritime operator holding accounts and other stakeholders to this webinar. And some of today's topics will be about the Norwegian Emissions Trading Registry, about submitting verified emissions reports, entering emissions into the registry, and surrendering allowances. So we will start with a presentation that lasts for about 30 minutes. And after that, you're all welcome to ask questions. Our presenters today are Konrad Sandvik, Høysen Lie, and Ingeborg Rian Julsrud. Also, a few more of our colleagues are available to answer questions afterwards. So just a few practical things before we start. We will publish a recording of the webinar and the presentation after today's webinar, hopefully sometime during the late afternoon today. And you will find it on the website where you registered for the webinar. For the questions, use the Q&A function, and it's also helpful if you can vote for questions that you are interested in hearing the answer to yourself. There's a thumbs up vote function, and when we start answering the questions, that's how I will sort the questions. So the questions with the most votes will be answered first. Also, my colleagues will try to answer some of the questions in writing. So keep an eye out for written answers, and maybe also some of the participants can help answer some of the questions if you do have the answer to them, of course. All right, you're welcome to post questions during the presentation, but then we will start going through them once the presentation is finished. All right, that's all for now. So I would like to welcome on the virtual stage here, Konrad Sandvik, who will start out among the presenters.
Thank you very much, Espen. And first of all, good morning to all the participants. I would like to warmly greet you on behalf of the Norwegian Environment Agency and the Norwegian Emissions Trading Registry. We realize that this will be the first time for most of you reporting emissions and surrendering allowances in the EU registry. So hopefully you will find this webinar useful. Let's start with our first slide. If you remember nothing else from this webinar, please remember these important deadlines for the year of 2025. By March 31st, you must have reported your emissions in the EU registry. This means that emissions must be submitted and verified by a verifier within the date of March 31st. The second deadline is September 30th, which by you have to surrender allowances in the EU registry. This means allowances corresponding to your reported emissions must be purchased before this date and surrendered in the EU registry within the 30th of September. Now, let's go to our next slide for a little bit of background on who we are. The Norwegian Environment Agency is an agency under the Ministry of Climate and Environment, and our mission is to work for a clean and diverse environment. Within the Norwegian Environment Agency, we actually are tasked with being both the competent authority and the national administrator within the EU ETS. In other countries, this might be separated into different entities, but in Norway, we have both roles in the same agency. They're just separate people working on it. So We have the Emissions Trading Registry, which are charged with administrating the Norwegian part of the Union Registry. And then we have a shipping team that is tasked with evaluating and monitoring plans and emission reports. So if we go to the next slide, you can sum it up with questions on your account applications and use of the registry are best directed to the Emissions Trading Registry, while questions on monitoring plans, verifying emissions, and emissions reports are best directed to the shipping team. Now, let's go through a little bit of background on the European emissions trading system. Next slide to get some of the basics. One of the principles of the emissions trading system, EU ETS, is that one allowance is equivalent to 1 ton of CO2 equivalent emissions. Parties subject to EU ETS must purchase and surrender allowances equal to their emissions. And each year, the number of new allowances issued is reduced. These allowances are tradable and purchasable, sellable between parties in the registry and also parties that join the registry through a trading account. This makes parties in the EU ETS have an economic incentive to reduce their emissions. And the goal is to efficiently cut emissions where it is cheapest to cut them, meaning that one company that have an easier time reducing their emissions need to purchase fewer emissions allowances, while other countries having a harder time have the option of purchasing more allowances instead of reducing emissions. Now let's go to the next slide. You will, let's see. There are different kinds of EU allowances, but what you must know is that the EU trading system and EU allowances are separate from, different from, and not exchangeable with any other emission allowances from other trading systems. Only EU allowances can be used for surrendering allowances in the EU ETS. Today, there are 2 kinds of EU allowances that you can encounter when purchasing on an open market. It's the regular EU allowances, abbreviation EUA, and the legacy aviation allowances, EUAA. There are no longer new EUAA, aviation allowances, issued, but that does not mean that you cannot use them to surrender allowances for your emissions. In other words, the EUA and EUAA allowances are perfectly exchangeable, and they have no different effect when you are trying to surrender for your emissions. It's simply a legacy allowances used previously to calculate and for aviation operators to surrender for their emissions. But these systems have been merged, and you can use the aviation allowances even though you are not an aviation operator. There will not be any separate type of allowances issued for shipping companies. You can simply use the EUA and EUAA allowances. Let's go to the next slide. The other thing that you might need to be aware of is that the emissions trading system is divided into different phases. So we are currently in phase 4, and after 2030, we will enter phase 5. Phase 3 was from 2013 until 2020. So all you need to know is that these phase 3 and phase 4 are the kinds of allowances you can use to surrender for your emissions in phase 4. You will also be able to use phase 3 and phase 4 allowances in future phases. But you will not be able to use phase 1 or phase 2 allowances. Now, let's go to Our next slide. This is generally how you purchase and trade allowances. As most of you know, for shipping companies, there will be no free allocation, but for the first couple of years, you will not be obliged to surrender allowances for 100% of your emissions. My colleague will get back to this later. But the main way for the EU Commission and countries to sell allowances is through auctioning on the European Energy Exchange, which has the abbreviation EEX. Here, companies subject to the EU ETS and other specific actors like banks, trading institutions, credit institutions can participate in the auctions. They are usually held every 3 times a week. And one quirk of these auctions is that the allowances are sold in blocks of 500. So for actors in need of lesser amounts of allowances, they can acquire these through actors selling the allowances in smaller batches in the open market through bilateral trading or over-the-counter trading. And with that, I think I will give the word to my colleague, Hussein, and she will take you through some slides on maritime transport in MRV and the EU ETS. Thank you all.
Thank you, Konrad. And I will take you through some slides covering ship types that are covered by the MRV and the EU ETS, obligation to surrender allowances, and the key requirement and deadline for emission reports. So next slide, please. As you probably are aware of, ships above 5,000 gross tonnage transporting cargo and the passenger have been included in the MRV since 2018 and in the EU ETS since last year. For offshore ships above 5,000 gross tonnage, they will be included in the ETS from 2027. And for general cargo ships and offshore ships between 400 and 5,000 gross tonnage, their inclusion in the ETS will be considered in 2026. There are certain ship types that are not covered by the regulation, such as warships or garment ships used for non-commercial purposes. So please see Article 2.2 in the MRV for the complete list. Next slide, please. In this slide, we will provide a brief overview of the geographical scope of the ETS and the share of emissions that are subject to the surrendering of allowances. So for voyages within the EEA and the port operation in the EEA, 100% of the emission are subject to allowances. For voyages between the EEA and the third country outside the EEA, 50% of the emissions are subject to allowances. The shipping company will not receive any free allocation of allowances, like Konrad said. On the other hand, there are phasing rules which are intended to give the shipping companies a somewhat smoother transition into the EU ETS, so that they don't have to surrender allowances for all the emission from the first year. So by the end of September this year, the shipping companies must surrender allowances covering 40% of the emissions reported for 2024, and the share will increase to 70% next year. And by the end of September 2027, the shipping companies must surrender allowances covering 100% of the emissions reported for 2026. There are some derogations. For instance, vessels with ice class 1A, 1A Super, or an equivalent ice class established based on recommendation of the Baltic Marine Environment Protection Commission might surrender 5% fewer allowances than the verified emission released until the end of 2030. And this is just an example, and there are additional derogations in the regulation. Next slide, please. This slide shows the main requirement and important deadline for emission report. So once per year, the shipping companies must submit an emission report for each of the ships under their responsibility, as well as an emission report at the company level, which is an emission report with aggregated data for ETS purposes. All the emissions must be verified by an independent verifier, and the report must be submitted to us through THETIS-MRV, which is a common EU IT platform for submitting monitoring plans and the emission report for maritime sector. And the deadline for submitting the report is end of March each year. And now my colleague Ingeborg will go through the guidance for the registry. So Ingeborg, over to you.
Thank you, Hüsan. So now I am going to talk a little bit about the registry, and I will then guide you through the tasks that you need to complete in order to fulfill your obligations as a shipping company. That is how you can enter your emissions in the registry and how you can surrender allowances. To clarify expectations, I will say that I'm not going to be covering the process of acquiring access to the registry today, nor how to apply for an account. So for anyone who is in the process of applying for an account now, please see the online guidance that we will link at the end of this presentation. First, a quick intro to the registry. The registry can be described as a kind of bank of allowances. So like normal money banks, the registry has accounts and you can perform transactions, and there's also a fairly high level of security tied to accessing the registry. Importantly, like Konrad said earlier, all the EU ETS allowances that exist, they exist inside the registry and they cannot be transferred to other systems. The diagram to the right here shows the relationship between the Norwegian ETS registry and the Union registry. The large circle in the diagram is what we call the Union registry, and this is run by the European Commission. The Union registry is the technical infrastructure of the entirety of the EU's registry, and it is the visual user interface, the security measures, and all the technical functionality of the registry system. And I'd like to note here that since the Commission controls the software and the technical framework, we often have to contact the central administrator in the Commission in order to troubleshoot technical issues in the registry. Back to the diagram now. The little orange circle here shows the Norwegian ETS registry, which is the part of the Union registry that is administered by us, the Norwegian Environment Agency. As Konrad said earlier, the Norwegian Environment Agency has the role of national administrator of Norway, administering access to our part of the registry, reviewing applications, checking transactions, and so on. So each of the countries that are a part of the EU ETS have their own little circle in this diagram to the right, with their own entity acting as national administrator in their nation. In this slide, I will quickly describe what types of accounts you can have in the registry. The table shows what actions can be completed with the two general types of accounts, namely operator accounts and trading accounts. And the different types of operator accounts include operator holding accounts, aircraft operator holding accounts, and maritime operator holding accounts. The operator account types are reserved for entities that have responsibilities under the EU ETS, and the responsibilities include entering emissions and surrendering allowances. The trading account is not tied to any surrendering responsibilities under the EU ETS, and just to note, in Norway's registry, only companies with Norwegian organization numbers may have a trading account. And you also need at least one authorized representative residing in Norway. As you can read from this table, with an operator account, you can perform all the 4 tasks on the left here. That is, you can enter emissions, you can surrender allowances, you can keep allowances in your account, and you can transfer or receive allowances to and from other accounts in the registry. With the trading accounts, you cannot enter emissions or surrender allowances, of course, but you can keep and transfer or receive allowances. So as you can see here, the operator account has all the functionality of a trading account. Before I move forward with the registry guide, I would like to remind you of 2 important acronyms in the registry. Most of you are probably already aware, but just to minimize confusion, make sure we are all on the same page. A maritime operator holding account, which is the account type that is relevant for our discussion today, may be abbreviated to MOHA. An authorized representative of an account in the registry may be abbreviated to AR. Now, finally, we will get on with our guide on how you enter emissions in the registry. A quick note, some of the features I'm going to show you are not currently yet available in the production environment of the registry, but a new release version of the registry will be deployed tomorrow, March 5th. So hopefully most of these features will be functioning thereafter. And this presentation will be shared, meaning you will not only get an intro to these tasks now, you will hopefully also be able to use the slides as a guide once you are going to perform the tasks yourself. All right, so there are 3 general steps to complete in order to enter your emissions in the registry. Before the emissions are entered, the authorized representative of the shipping company needs to appoint their verifier to the account. The verifier of the emission report should also verify the quantity of emissions in the registry, meaning the appointed verifier should be the same. The second task is to enter the emissions in the registry. This is also done by the authorized representative of the shipping company. The third part is for the verifier to mark the entered quantity of emissions as verified. And all 3 of these steps need to be completed by the end of March 31st to comply. Only one authorized representative from the shipping company is needed in order to enter the emissions, but a representative from the verifier company must also log in to approve. All right, so when you enter the registry as AR, you will arrive in one of 2 places. If you are an authorized representative for more than one account, you will see a list of your accounts, and you need to click one of them in order to arrive on this overview page here. If you are authorized representative for only one account, you arrive directly on this overview page. The overview page shows the account balance, the compliance status of the account, a history of transactions, as well as tasks to be addressed. On the left-hand side, there is a navigation menu where you can navigate through different pages of information available on your account. All right, so like I said, the first step now is to appoint a verifier to your account, and this is completed by an authorized representative. So from here, if you click the button Compliance in the left-hand side menu, then you will end up on this page, and here you can click the button Appoint Verifier all the way to the right that I've circled here. And then you will get this window to pop up where you can choose your verifier from the drop-down list. The list will contain all open verifier accounts that are accredited for maritime transport in the Norwegian registry. And the registry will also ask you to confirm by clicking Submit. And Once you have submitted the appointment, the verifier has to accept the appointment, and it is not completed until the verifier has accepted it. It's important that the verifier is appointed to the account before the next step where you enter your emissions, because the verifier will only be able to approve the emissions that are entered after appointment. All right, so after the verifier has been appointed, you may enter your emissions. This can be done by clicking the Quick Actions button on the top right here, and then click Report Emissions. A window will then pop up asking you to enter your emissions. The year of emissions should be the year 2024. You should not be able to choose a different year this spring, but next year you will have the option to choose 2025 and so on. The number of emissions is supposed to be the same number that you reported in the company level emissions report as submitted in THETIS-MRV. As noted to the right here, the corresponding number is reported in point 5 part C of the company level emissions report. Now, if your company is eligible for the ICE class ship derogation that Huizen talked about earlier, you can check the box ICE class ship derogation applicable, and you will be able to enter the reduced amount of CO2 with the ICE class reduction. All right, so below the reduced emissions headline here, the system will compute the reduction of the emissions for you, since you're only surrendering allowances for 40% of your emissions from 2024. So the system does this computation for you. And so the number up here should be the full emissions. Next, you click Propose, and the number will be sent for approval by your appointed verifier. Now, a representative of the verifier needs to log in to their verifier account to approve if the number is correct, and your reported emissions should show up in their task list. And once this has been approved, the entered emissions are marked as verified in the registry, and this approval task is the final one that must be performed by March 31st. Now, should you not be able to complete these 3 tasks by the end of March 31st, the automatic consequence is that your account will be blocked. This means that you cannot transfer allowances out of the account. You may, however, receive allowances, and you may enter your emissions. For your account to be unblocked, the only thing you need to do is to enter the missing emissions and get these verified. And once that has been done, the account will be unblocked, and you will again be able to transfer allowances to others. So, and now we are done with the tasks that must be performed by the end of March. We will now go on to the surrendering of allowances, which must be done by September 30th. This task requires 2 authorized representatives from the shipping company. It is completed in 2 steps, where first, one authorized representative proposes the surrender of allowances, and second, a different authorized representative approves the surrender. The authorized representative that is to propose the surrender needs to have initiator rights. The authorized representative that is to approve the surrender must have approver rights. Now, most ARs have both of these rights, but you should make sure beforehand. The proposing of surrender can be done as follows. All the way to the right here again on the compliance page, you can click Quick Actions and then Surrender Allowances. A page will then open where you should enter the number of allowances you are surrendering. On the top is a summary of your current compliance status. So there will be numbers here once you have submitted your emissions. The table will also show if you've already surrendered any allowances and how much you owe. Below this is the table where you input the amount you want to surrender. All the way to the right, under quantity to transfer, you need to add the number of allowances you are surrendering. The table here shows 4 rows, each with a different type of allowance, and the table should only contain the type of allowances that are available in your account. So the top 2 rows here show normal allowances, phase 3 and 4, as Konrad talked about earlier. And the 3rd and 4th row here show the aviation allowances from phase 3 and phase 4. So, like Konrad said, all of these types of allowances are possible to use for surrender. Now, to comply, the quantity of allowances here need to add up to the number you owe for surrender. And once you click Propose on the bottom here, the registry will ask you to sign the transaction using EU login. Next, a different authorized representative needs to log in, and this, again, needs to be an authorized representative with approver rights. On the left-hand side menu, the authorized representative needs to find tasks and click this. And then they need to find the task that's called surrender allowances. So here there's only one task. Click it, and then the task will show up in a window, and there the second authorized representative will check the numbers. If the quantity is indeed correct, they can click approve and will be asked to confirm the approval and to sign the transaction using EU login. The surrender of allowances then happens immediately and without delay. Now, failure to surrender allowances by the end of September 30th will result in your account being in compliance status B, and we will then charge a penalty fee. This follows from the EU ETS directive, and in Norwegian regulation, the Greenhouse Gas Emission Trading Act, Section 19, in Norwegian Klimakvoteloven, paragraph 19. The penalty fee is 100 euros per ton of CO2 that you have not surrendered allowances for, and it is also adjusted for the EU inflation rate, meaning that the penalty number increases every year. Okay. Finally, here we provide some links to online guidance that might be useful for you. On the top here is a link to the Environment Agency's guidance in English and also our email address for questions about the registry. Next is the European Commission's frequently asked questions about the EU ETS, as well as a general guidance document from the Commission. And thereafter, we have some guidance from EMSA, the European Maritime Safety Agency, which is the agency that runs the THETIS-MRV. Any technical issues related to THETIS-MRV should be directed to this email address here. And finally, we've added a link to European accreditation for an overview of accredited verifiers. As previously said, these slides will be shared afterwards, so you can use these links then. So with that, I've said everything I was planning to say, and I thank you for your attention. I think we'd like to open the floor to questions.
Thank you very much, Ingeborg, Huysen, and Konrad for that. So you can go ahead and close the presentation. That should be on the left-hand upper side there. And then all of you, my colleagues, please switch on your camera so that we can see you, and we will start to work on the questions. And what I'm doing now is that I will go to the Q&A section of Teams here, and I'm clicking on the arrows that point up and down, and I'm selecting the ones that with the most votes. So if you want to follow along, you can go ahead and do that as well. Just a quick question, Ingeborg, is your camera on? Can you, my colleagues, Hussein, Nora, can you see Ingeborg? No, you can't? All right. See if you have your camera there and switch it on if you can. And the presentation is still up there, at least on my view. So let's see if you can take it down. All right. And I can see that already some of the questions have been answered in writing, but I will read them out just in case for the people who are watching this afterwards, the recording, because then the written comments here may not be available. All right, so the question that I have on top right now is the following. The deadline of reporting emissions by 31st of March this year, will that have to be done in the EU registry or via THETIS or both? And what do shipping companies that do not have a MOHA account by this deadline do? And there is a written answer here or a comment, and that is the reporting of emissions must be done in the EU registry and THETIS by the deadline, March 31st. So if you open an account after this deadline, the account will have the status blocked and you will not be able to transfer allowances from this account to other accounts. However, you will be able to receive allowances and surrender them. I'm just wondering if any of you want to add something to that? No? All right. Then let's go and archive that question and we'll move on to the next one. And here it says, regarding the 6% biofuel sales requirement in Norway, how to report as a shipping company? And my colleague Hussein says, we understand the challenges related to biofuels. We are working on this matter. Could you please send us a mail so that we can get back to you? And then there's a question, where to send. So Hussein, which email address to use for that?
You can send to my email address, or alternatively, you can go to our homepage, and there's a function called cannot find answers to your question, and there's a guidelines for how to enter question there.
All right. Okay. So now I think I closed the presentation there. All right, good stuff. I'll archive this question and we'll move on to the next one. When will it be possible to appoint a verifier within the EU registry? And we have an answer here from Nora. It will technically be possible to choose a verifier within the EU registry tomorrow, March 5th, after an update of the registry. However, if the verifier has not yet opened a verifier account, it will not appear on the list of verifiers to choose from. Okay, good. And if any of you, of my colleagues now, want to add something to this, just switch on your microphone and speak out. Okay. So that one went into the archive now, and I'll go on to the next one. If the emissions are reported on THETIS, do we still need to appoint a verifier on this union registry platform before March 31st. And colleague Petter here has written something. Yes, you must also appoint a verifier and report the emissions in the union registry. The emissions number must be verified by a verifier. Okay. So we'll archive that and we'll go to the next. And this one doesn't have a written answer yet. So let's see. Will the slides be distributed to the attendees? Well, I can answer that. We will not send them out by email, but you can go to the event web page at miljødirektoratet.no and you will find it there by the end of the day. Okay, together with the recording. All right, let's look at the next one here. We have merged some ship-owning companies during 2024. Will the deleted companies have to surrender allowances, or will the merged company have to surrender? So, anyone?
I can answer this one. I will try to answer this one. So for any shipping or for the companies that had the shipping company status for any part of 2024, they will have to open an account to surrender allowances for the period in which they had the responsibility. If anyone wants to add anything, yeah.
No. Okay. And if any of you who ask questions, post questions, feel that you don't get enough details right now, well, get in touch with us afterwards, and of course we will help you with more details. All right, next one here. Are the consequences of not entering emissions by March 31st aligned and valid for all member states, or are there any differences between the member states how they deal with it? And we have a comment here from Petter. If you do not enter verified emissions by 31st of March, the account status will be changed to blocked. This applies for all registers in the EU ETS. Okay.
I can just add that this is automatic in the registry. It happens, automatically for everyone.
Yeah. All right, good. Will there be a fee for appointing a verifier? Does anyone know?
There is no fee for a verifier account in the registry, so any fee would be in your deal with the verifier, in your contract with the verifier, but not to us.
Thank you. All right, next one. Is there is there any penalty for the missed deadline submission date March 31st of company level EU ETS reporting apart from the MOHA account getting blocked? And there's no written answer there, so what can we say about that?
I can just say for right now, the immediate consequence is only that the account gets blocked for not reporting by March 31st in the registry. Yeah. Does anyone else want to add anything?
No.
Yes, there might be other measures that we can take, but I'm actually not aware right now.
Okay.
If this becomes a problem, we will certainly look into it.
Okay, good. All right, next one. Is there an allowance or reduction for a ship undergoing conversion for the majority of 2024? That's a question from Alan, if you'd like to take a look at it.
Well, you only have to surrender allowances for the emissions that you have had. So if you have had a certain number of emissions, you will have to surrender allowances for those emissions. But since this is the first year, as Hussein said, it will be only for 40% of your reported emissions. And that applies to all shipping companies.
Thank you, Konrad. Okay. So I'll move on. Is the deadline of March 31st applicable for all the national registries, or is this for Norway only? And we may have a written answer here. Yes, the deadline of March 31st applies to all national registries. Good. And we'll go on to the next one. We acquired 2 new ships in March 2024. We changed their DOC holder at a later date in October. We have submitted a mandate letter for these vessels, assigning the responsibility to our DOC holder in October. So the question then is, who is responsible for submitting allowances for the period when it had changed ownership to us, but still had the old DOC holder?
Well, as I understand this question, it will depend on whether the intermediate dock holder was had a contract to be a shipping company or a maritime operator in the EU ETS. So for specific examples like this, I think it would be helpful for you to contact us directly with the specifics of the situation. But if there was an interim dock holder that was classified as a shipping company, then they would be responsible for having an account and submitting for the emissions of that ship in the period that they were assigned as the shipping company. And if you have now taken over the responsibility as a shipping company, you will submit emission reports and surrender allowances from the date that you became the entity shipping company under the rules of the EU ETS.
Okay, we'll move on. Just a second. I would appreciate your clarification regarding the EU ETS applicability for a vessel departing China on December 19th, 2024 and arriving in Norway in early 2025. Given that EU ETS applies to 50% of emissions for voyages between an EU and a non-EU port, could you confirm whether the emissions from this voyage would be accounted for under the 2024 or 2025 reporting period? Additionally, how would the phase-in obligations affect the allowances required for this particular voyage? For the voyage in question, the shipping company would need to surrender allowances for 40% of 50% of the emissions. In other words, 20% of the total emissions by September 30th, 2025. Okay, so that's a long, complicated matter. I don't know if you're able to answer it here.
Maybe I can answer the question. So a reporting period is a calendar year. So for this voyage, and since it started at December 19th, 2024, for the emission from December 19th, 2024 to the end of December 2024, those emissions belong to reporting period 2024. And for the emission from 1st January 2025 till the end of the voyage, it belongs to reporting period 2025. And
Thank you,
also, if it's a new building and does not transport any cargo or passengers for that particular voyage, it is not subject to MRV and the ETS. And if the new building is transport cargo or passenger, it is subject to MRV and the EU ETS.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the next one. If I can find my pointer here. Very interesting. All right. That's rather funny. There we go. Okay. Found my mouse pointer somehow disappeared. Okay, next one here is the transfer of allowance can only be done in round numbers, but calculation can have decimal. So should it be round up or down? Okay. Can anyone answer that?
I don't know the general rule of this, but your verified emissions will be rounded to a number, and that will be a whole number. So you will have to submit the allowances according to your verified emissions report, which will be a whole number.
Thank you. Okay. And the next one, we only had 2 ARs under the MOHA. One of the AR just left the company. Will it affect the emission reporting during we applying for new ARs? There is no EEA EU voyage in the past year for the fleet.
In general, or in any case, you will need 2 ARs to report and surrender your allowances. But if you have another application pending, that will then probably not hinder your ability to report. Do any of you want to add something to that?
No.
I can add something. So when you are entering your emissions, you only need 1 AR from the shipping company in order to do the entering of emissions by March 31st. So you need an AR from the shipping company, but also you need the verify AR. But yeah, so this shouldn't be a problem during the emission reporting.
Good clarification. Thank you, Ingeborg.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. If no vessels have called at any EU port in 2024, is it still required, according to regulations, to have the emissions report verified by an accredited verifier and submit it to the administering authority in the THETIS-MRV?
Maybe I can answer that. You might choose to delete those vessels that are not fall under the scope of MRV and the EU ETS. But if you prefer to have those vessels in the THETIS-MRV, we need to control and approve those monitoring plans and check those emission reports. And such operation from us are fee-based.
Okay, thank you. Next one, please confirm if 1 AR can have both rights, entering EUAs and approval of EUAs.
I can answer this question. An AR can have both the roles of initiator and approver of tasks in the registry, but the same AR cannot initiate and approve tasks in the registry, if that makes sense.
At least not the same task.
Yeah.
There can be an initiator for one task and approver for another task, but the same task will have to be initiated by one AR and approved by another.
Thank you. That was, as far as I can see, the last question that was posted here. So there are a couple of minutes left until it's 11 o'clock. If any of you participants have another question, please post it right now. Are there any other things that you, my colleagues here, would like to add before we round off today's session? Any last encouragement or?
I will just say, if anyone comes up with questions after we log off here today, you can direct these to the email address kvoteregister@miljodir.no. That is on the top of the next to final slide.
Good. All right, no more questions have popped up here. So then we'll finish for today. Thank you very much, Øystein, Ingeborg, Nora, Petter, Marken, and Konrad. And of course, thanks to all of you participants. And maybe we'll see you back someday in the future. Have a continued nice day, and bye-bye for now.